Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to Let's Talk Maywood on Diversity Today Media. I am your host, Dr. Reggie Ratliff, and joining me is my co-host, my co-laborer in the vineyard, and expert investment advisor, Terrence Hollisworth. Terry, good evening, brother.
Hello, how are you doing?
Good, man. I'm enjoying my summer break
What's the
right
weather
now,
like out there?
spending time with family, trying to get overcome this heat, you know, triple digits,
Yeah,
man. It's crazy. But just thank God for being able to feel it. How's it going out there in Iowa? Where you at these days?
yeah, I'm in out by Des Moines, but I'm in Iowa, and things are good, right? Not too hot. Um, I guess it's good that way, but maybe not so good with the stock market. We've been down a couple of days. Um,
We're down
the
today
seats,
too, right?
yeah, like 500. I think we ended up 500. We were down as much as 800 during the day.
Okay, yeah.
Um, the ceasefire has gone away, so
It's over.
that's driving the market, right?
Yeah, and he flew. And Donald Trump flew back to D.C. in he said the old plane, old
Oh,
airplane.
is there something wrong with it? The the new one already?
No, he was saying they wanted to send that to Europe to some bases out there so the troops can look at it. They don't care about that plane.
Right.
He's tripping. But nonetheless, he's flying back in Air Force One, and they're not going to say anything's wrong with it, if anything. So, but I wanted to ask you, Terry. There's been a lot of issues going on with team takeover across the nation. Um, has that hit any city in Iowa?
No, we have not had any of that, so that's good.
Yeah, I know it's been everywhere. I know it was two cities in South Carolina, and then one city in Georgia, but also in Chicago, other places where there's been thousands of teenagers and young adults just flocking, with their phones and everything, recording shootings and that kind of stuff, stabbings, just crazy. So I didn't know if you heard anything about that.
No,
Um,
I heard about it, but that's generally I think a more of a big city issue, right?
yeah,
And we're not there, but the thing that's absolute is I find myself a lot saying to people when we start talking about the black community and where we are,
yeah,
and I say, we can solve our own problems, right?
yeah,
And some of this stuff is ridiculous, right? At
yeah,
the end of the day, it's ridiculous, right? We control $1.4 trillion as a community,
right,
and this is what we're investing in.
yeah. It's definitely possible that we can move forward as a community. I mean, black community, like Maywood. But sometimes we just stand in our own way. Controversies, divisiveness, a lack of cohesiveness, lack of a strategic plan, mismanagement of funds, politicking, so forth and so on. It can be problematic in many black communities.
So as we transition from just us talking about the economic landscape and um, just where we are as a community, what do you think is necessary? Because Maywood is transitioning like most communities are, right?
Yeah.
Um, what is it going to take for Maywood to kind of get on the right track? And I'm talking, economically, socially, all these things.
I think that leadership has to be honest with themselves. I've said this time and time before. Growing up in Maywood, we had everything we needed in terms of resources. That's not the case today. And it's not leadership of today's fault because Generation X, my generation, we did not pass the historical aspect to the next generation, which is Booker's generation. We didn't prepare them for what was to come because we didn't know what was to come in terms of economics. The businesses closing, factories closing, relocating, so forth and so on. So there's a lack of communication. which resulted in lack of connection. And as you see today, to Booker's credit, he's trying. But if you don't know where we come from, you won't know where you're going. And so that's why the strategic plan is so essential, Terry. A comprehensive plan is a microscope of a strategic plan. So you can have all the state of Maywood you want. You can have as many, many restaurants as you want. But until you have a strategic plan that lays everything out, that touches on every area of government that you can focus on, that's going to establish or reestablish, in this case, resources in the community, you're going to continue to spin your wheels. So we need to get back to bringing resources back to Maywood. That Fairhampton Pool, or Fairhampton Aquatic Center, as they call it, it may never reopen. A splash park is not the answer. I mean, it's a temporary solution to a long-term challenge. But again, I don't blame today's leaders, because our generation, Generation X, really didn't prepare this millennial generation for what's in place now. But they have to reestablish what used to be in terms of resources. So instead they have a strategic plan and they implement it, know what butters their bread. Like, where are your areas of expertise? Infrastructure, highways, roads, bridges, alleys, paving the streets, internet access, being able to use the money from the casino in a tangible way to reestablish these resources and be able to account for that. No patronage hiring. Then that's when they will get back on track. We have to improve the 13%, voting turnout. There's 24,000 residents in the village of Maywood. Why is only 2,500 people voting? So we have to be able, and I say we as if I live there, but I'm always Maywood. The people in Maywood, leadership in Maywood, has to be able to mobilize and start at the grassroots level. Focus on the youth, provide service for the seniors, work with the park district, work with the schools, not unilaterally, but collaboratively. And until that happens, Maywood is going to continue the cycle of divisiveness.
So we have an open forum here, right? And Trustee Jones is back with us. We appreciate that. Have you reached out to anyone else, invite them to come on the show and talk about some of these same things?
I did. As a matter of fact, I have reached out to Mayor Nathaniel Booker. He did respond. But like I said, there's divisiveness going on in the community. We were graceful enough to provide a long-term response. In part, he said because of some differences between himself and some of the other leaders who are in question right now, if you will, it's not moving Maywood forward. So at this time, he graciously declined to come on the podcast. However, he said that the next time I come home, he would be more than welcome to have a conversation with me as it relates to the position Maywood is in, present and future. I thanked him for that, but I told him the door is always open for him to come on and answer questions and be able to talk about what he's done for the village. So I would just add this, Terry. One thing that Mayor Booker and any other leader has to recognize is that you are judged based on your work, even your past performance portfolio, as Pastor Marvin Wiley from Rockavage Baptist Church says. If your past performance portfolio is not shady, or if it's not promising, people are going to question you. They're going to question you anyway. They question Mayor Joe Freeland. They question, Mr. Don Williams. They question Mr. Ralph Connor. They question Mr. Henderson Yarbrough. So just because people ask questions of Mayor Booker, even tough questions, that doesn't mean that it's not moving Maywood forward. You're not going to have everybody on your team. Everybody won't be happy with your performance. But it's important to have an open mind as a leader and accept constructive criticism, because they may say something that you may not think about or consider, and be able to take that and move forward. But if you're just going to be a monopoly, if you're monopolizing the board and monopolizing the constituents in the community, then you're going to have more divisiveness. So Mayor
Yeah.
Booker knows he can come on anytime he want. I think he's making an effort to do a good job. I think he should use his leadership team more, get back to meetings twice a month, and not get offended if someone criticizes him or his team.
Sounds good to me. On that note, I will see y'all later. I'm excited
Thank you,
to
sir.
hear this conversation with Trustee Jones. Until next time, folks.
Absolutely. Thank you as always, Brother Terrence. And as Terrence mentioned, we have the Honorable Trustee Miguel Jones joining us. And he is coming on our podcast to discuss what he's doing currently and to answer the questions that I have for the leadership team. So without further ado, Trustee Jones. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Dr. Ratliff. How's it going?
I'm good. How are you doing this summer?
Oh, I'm blessed.
Nice.
I'm enjoying it. Maywood is there's a lot of positive things going on.
Yeah.
Not only locally, but regionally.
Mhm.
That I think is benefiting Maywood, and I'm enjoying it despite the culture that has been pushed upon us by the federal government and its current leadership.
Mhm.
I'm happy that America has survived 250 years,
Indeed.
but we have a long way to go.
Absolutely.
Maywood has changed, over the past 30, 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so change is one of those things that we have to adapt to and we have to embrace. And that's why I'm here to help guide along with the residents and stakeholders what that change looks like.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Maywood has changed over the past generation or two. And you're part of that change, not just as a trustee, but someone who's been very involved and engaged in the community. And I want to start a conversation by talking about some of the work that you're doing. So please forgive me if I mispronounce it of what you're doing. The Tour de Proviso. Can you just talk about that, how that got started and how it has expanded into what it's doing today?
Sure. So Tour de Proviso is a community bike ride that started in Maywood and Broadview, with the support of and co-founder Mayor Katrina Thompson. But that was something that came out of COVID, where we wanted to still give the community an opportunity to ride and to exercise and get outside, and also still promote some of the things that our community needed. So we needed infrastructure improvement. At the time, Washington Boulevard had not been redeveloped. We didn't have any prominent bike lanes. Individuals were, at the time you couldn't go to the workout facilities, gyms, et cetera. So, we wanted to promote health and wellness and also infrastructure improvement and make our community a bikeable and walkable community. And so that's, that was the point of the initiative. And, we're going on, this will be year 7, and this year will be in Merrill's Park. So looking forward to, Maywood representing, in terms of going to visit our neighbors and, supporting that regional effort. So, we look forward to joining Merrill's Park this year and Tour de Proviso. And, there's been, we've branched off since then. So since then, we have revitalized, a bike club in Maywood. So the Best Proviso Township with the, under the leadership of Randall McFarland, helped start our Maywood Rolling Wheels Club. So we ride every Thursday. We meet right in front of Mastermind Nutrition on 5th Avenue. And, we get a great turnout. So most recently we did a night ride where we had the bikes lit up and we rode around the town and the community. It was vibrant. It was exciting. We want to promote, making Maywood the village of eternal light. So we turned our lights on and we rode through the community, through the 21 blocks, and it was exciting. So I'm looking forward to joining that group again tomorrow. Hopefully the weather, works with us. There is rain in the forecast, but presuming that we can, we'll be out there tomorrow.
Nice. How many participants do you normally have?
Yeah, so we range anywhere between two small groups, 2 to 3 to anywhere between 10 to 15 folks. But I would say consistently, we're definitely getting about 5 or 6 individuals that join us, and we usually hit the Prairie Path and head west toward, we'll go as far as Elmhurst or Lombard, Villa Park. We'll head east and we'll visit, downtown. We'll drive through the Austin community, North Lawndale. We'll visit the South Side. We'll join other bike clubs and participate as well. So, and in the Proviso Township, or even our neighboring towns like the village of Westchester, they have their own bike club as well that we'll join. But it's ultimately about networking and with our with our region, and it helps improve our brand, and it helps emphasize that Maywood not only has a bike lane, but it's a beautiful community where we want it to be walkable. We're also a riverfront community. I tell people that all the time. We're right off the Des Plaines River, beautiful riverfront community right by the Forest Preserve.
Yeah,
we're a community that people need to sightsee, ride through, visit. Visit our restaurants and some of our monuments, or whether it be the Hampton House or the statue of Chairman Fred right in front of the Aquatic Center.
Yeah.
Or visit some of the many things that represent our town.
Indeed. Yeah, it reminds me of my dad, because I grew up on Maywood Drive, 15th and Maywood Drive. So when that path was built, when they took off the train tracks and everything, it's kind of a sad day, but it told me that Maywood was changing. So we were like, okay, what are they going to replace the train tracks with? So eventually they tore the trees down, built the path. And I used to run around Maywood. I used to run down, from down Van Buren down to 25th around Maywood. Eventually I'll find my way back home on 15th and Maywood Drive. But that path allowed me to just run straight through without worrying about cars cutting in front of me and, worrying about lights and that kind of thing. It was really beneficial. So I really appreciated that. And my dad, I started to say, up to his, last couple of years of his time here on earth, he used to ride his bike all the way out to like Elmhurst, have his bottle of water with him. And that was one thing my dad always did. He always rode his bike, and he loved being on that path because it, I guess he felt free and allowed him to, again, feel safe when he rode his bike. And so the Prairie Path is definitely an asset in the community. So, and as you said, Trustee Jones, there's a lot of things in Maywood that people from outside the community can see as they ride through the village, right?
Absolutely. We have historic homes where the community that, once housed Dr. Percy Julian, I mentioned Chairman Fred, countless professional athletes. We have beautiful historic homes, Frank Lloyd Wright, and other historic architecture. And, we want to show it off because we want to target our audience in terms of who we want to live here and invest here. So we're looking for the working, the working family that want to purchase a home and that want to invest in our schools, our parks, that want to, make this place, home. And so we need to show it off, and we have to be, we have to show that through our actions. And so that's just one of the many things that we do. And it's not just us, but there's a lot of organizations that, show what's really good about the village. I think about Stairway to the Stars. I think about the many, churches that have been around for a while, Rock of Ages and Second Baptist, like so many, communities that have been around. And, we also want to embrace the diversity of our community as well. Maywood is a Black and brown community, so, there's a bunch of, Hispanic restaurants and bakeries that you could visit as well. And we just want to make sure that we are welcoming and that we want to attract, anyone from many backgrounds to live in our town.
Indeed. Do you see a lot of changes happening at a fast pace, meaning that the village has the capacity to deal with the change in demographics for the village?
Absolutely. we have, we're 21 blocks, so we're a small, knit community, but we are open for business. There's plenty of um, available, storefronts and homes that we would love for people to think about as far as making a home here or starting a business. So I think that's fair, and there's also a lot of opportunities to be involved. So we have a revitalized Maywood Chamber of Commerce. We have other community groups. We just recently opened up a economic community center at the former Maywood Housing Authority building. So we are creating the infrastructure necessary for our community to be inviting, for us to improve our brand in the region, so people feel welcome and also can see themselves living here. But there's room for improvement. We have not met my expectations as it relates to having citizen-led, appointed citizen committees and commissions, where citizens can voice their opinions and give thoughts to some of the things that we need to address, like parking or our underground infrastructure, or how we utilize our parks, and how we utilize our green space, and what that looks like from our rules and regulations. So there's plenty of opportunity to listen to the residents, because you would be surprised how many residents have the right answer or can add value to which direction we want to go in. So at the end of the day, we are our community's representatives. They elect us to represent their values and their opinions, and it's our job to solicit residents and solicit stakeholders and business folks to discuss and collaborate, and then for us ultimately to have a community that's something that everyone chimes in on. So there's a bunch of room for improvement, but Maywood, we have not reached our capacity. We're not close, but we have made some positive strides. We've received a lot of federal and state investment. I think about the infrastructure bill, which a lot of communities received. So that's how we have the ability to get new streets and resurfacing projects. We've done a lot of ARPA, American Rescue Plan. We've done a lot of state grants. We're thankful for our state representatives and our county representatives as well, that have not forgotten about Maywood and the Proviso Township. So and shout out to members of the community and the board for going out and asking for those resources. So a lot to be proud of, but then we don't want to settle for mediocrity, because these things are something that the community expects. We were behind, and so there's a lot to play catch up on, and so we are catching up, and the community is noticing. But if you were failing and now you're starting to get a D or C, that is improvement. But when we look at our region, we still have a lot to be desired, and that's something that we have a responsibility to not settle for average, but to go for extraordinary.
I know that there's, at least on social media, there's this old versus new Maywood, whatever the case may be. We're still Maywood. It's just a different time, and as you mentioned, Trustee Jones, during my time growing up in Maywood in the 70s and 80s, we had almost 20 different community commissions, and that dealt with parks, Little League baseball, worked with the Central Area Park District. We even had a commission that put together a project where, at least on 15th, there were several blocks, the 15th and 16th Avenue and Maywood Drive, they planted trees. And because of that, it helped us with the growth of trees, led to shades, reducing our electric bill. We didn't have to run the AC as much, because that helped. The other was putting poles, light poles in front of our house. And that was under the Freeline administration, and also the Don Williams administration. But they, as you said, they listen to the citizens. We live it every single day. and therefore you can't be on every block. You can't be on every street. You can't be on, watch every boulevard. People, we lived there in that time. It was in the upper 20s, like 29,000 residents. So we didn't come complaining. We came with a concern, but also a solution or a recommendation via the committee. And the mayor at the time and the trustee, the boards, the board of trustees, they listened and they acted. And so although there is, incremental progress, there still is a long way to go. And I think, to your point, the number one challenge that leadership needs to focus on is listening to the residents and not be offended if the constituents, either public forum or in the community, say something they aren't happy with. Do you agree?
I agree 100%. I think, we're in a dynamic where politics is ran by narratives, and there is a tendency to want to control the narrative. And usually it's to keep things positive. But one of the unique things about living in a democratic republic like we are, in a representative government like we are in America, is we are open to criticizing the government. It keeps us honest, it keeps us accountable and transparent. And so we have to solicit and invite that feedback. Affluent communities, vibrant communities are not just led by the governing bodies, but are also led by nonprofit organizations, watchdog groups, grassroots organizations chime in and provide feedback that helps support final decisions. And so when we eliminate that feedback, because we want to get rid of what might be deemed to be red tape or, negative voices or complainers.
Right.
What we're also doing is taking, we're throwing out the baby with the bathwater too. We create a culture of where people are silent for things they see. People are not, speaking up about things that are important, and it just becomes it just becomes a problem. And so I think that's one of those things where, and that's where we see low voter turnout, because they, it contributes to voter apathy and thinking as if, their voice doesn't matter. So two things can be true. I think the community is appreciative of the hard work of people that are contributing and are in these roles, but also we have to make sure that we're taking a step back and allowing folks to think independently, that we have to step out of the way and allow the stakeholders of the community, which are the people that pay property taxes, the people that the voters, the residents, they are stakeholders. They have a seat at the table. Absolutely. And so we have to make sure that we create space for them without undue influence.
Right.
There's been a couple times on the board where I have brought to the board that trustees should be liaisons or leading committees and commissions, that whether it be economic development, whether it be fiscal accountability and transparency, whether it's traffic and safety, and there has been significant pushback. And from my perspective, that's because the tone in our community, and what has been the sentiment of some of the members on our board, is that they wanted to consolidate the power of our community to the elected officials. That's what the referendum in 2025 about changing our form of government from council manager to strong mayor. Yeah, it was to consolidate that power and essentially have more power rising to the top. And we see that at the federal government as well, with the lack of responsibility of Congress, and their responsibility to control the purse strings, to declare war, to assign tariffs. And that's one of the things where I hope the voters and residents at the local level and national level push back on that, because when you encourage that culture, it's very hard to turn it back.
Not only that, Trustee Jones, if I may interject, but you see what's happening at the national level. one person is trying to control everything, or a few is trying to control everything. And in business, that's called oligopoly, where a few control everything. And you silent people are not voting because they see what's happening and they're not happy, who live in Maywood. And the way it's run is unfortunate and it's problematic. So, Terry, what happened to Trustee Jones? There he is. And so you see that happening at the local level, Trustee Jones, as you just mentioned. And I don't know if it's by design, that it's a temptation to follow that as a best practice, but it doesn't work on a national level, and it sure enough doesn't work on the local level. So can you talk a little bit more, Terry? Post that comment by one of our viewers about not the oversight, not the committees, but it was talking about the not the American Rescue Plan. It was by the CFA. What was that was mentioned? That's it. Can you see that, Trustee Jones?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Can you respond to that, please?
Yes. So I can't speak for the mayor, and I can't speak for the individuals that have not chimed in on the fact that trustees have not been assigned oversight committees. What I can say is my perspective. I mentioned the referendum that happened in Maywood back in April of 2025. And I believe that there is a sentiment that the council manager form of government has not worked in Maywood and that we need to go a different direction. And it was voted on that the community wanted to keep our form of government. And so I think there's been an approach to leverage the board majority to create a hybrid form of government where we essentially consolidate a lot of the decision making to 4 or 5 people on the board, and not solicit the input of not just other trustees per se, but also the residents. In order to do that, it would impact the narrative in terms of what's driving improvements in the town.
Right.
I also think, similar to what's happening at the national level, and I mentioned earlier about one of the benefits of being in our form of government is there's been an attack on the press. Unfortunately, Maywood is really feeling the impact of not having something like the Village Free Press,
right,
covering our community and holding us accountable. That's one of the things that without press, you are very susceptible to propaganda.
Yeah.
Our newsletter has transitioned from being something where our village administration handles to now it's handled by our community engagement department, which is essentially ran by our mayor. And I think what that does is it gives a partisan lens to what's happening in the town, versus one great benefits about the council manager form of government is you have a village manager that is qualified to run the town, but also is required to be nonpartisan.
Right.
So I think that's important because it gives, or should suggest, a more matter of fact information about what's happening in the town. It allows department heads to chime in on things that they're working on. It allows residents to know the correct way to communicate with our government. Maywood is a $50 million a year organization,
right?
And we should be very sophisticated in which how residents interact with this type of entity. I've noticed that there's become a culture of, if you can't get a response out of calling Village Hall, then you just go on social media and hope that an elected official will respond, and then that's how things get done. And I understand why residents do it, because it's been effective, but it also exposes the fact that our community is not operating in a sophisticated way.
Right.
What should be happening is that, one, we need to address why things that are communicated through the My Civic app, or if we're calling Village Hall and we're not getting an answer, that needs to be resolved and fixed.
Indeed.
Elected officials in our town are part-time, including, the mayor and the village trustees are part-time. That's how the council manager form of government works.
Right.
The village manager gets paid six figures to manage our town. We have a water department, we have a finance department, we have public works, we have police, fire. Those entities need to be responsive because our taxpayers pay for that.
Right.
So if that's not happening effectively, then we need to address that. It is fine to reach out to us, and I'm more than welcome to, help with community issues and things that need to be, brought to a higher attention. But, we should be the last resort. I think in other communities, they don't rely so much on their elected officials to get, a sign fixed or get a pothole filled.
Right.
Get if there's fireworks going on or things like that, they lean on the proper departments, and so I think that's something that we just need to be cognizant of. That is that, are we creating a culture where we're operating outside of how we're supposed to be, operating? It just sets the wrong tone, and it actually discourages people from wanting to be involved. And the last thing I'll say about this committee and committee structure, a lot of current people on the board, their first start to experience local government was through being appointed to a citizen-led committee and commission.
Mm-hmm.
That's where they got their experience. That's where you learn how to run a board meeting. That's where you learn to listen to experts that come in, or business owners that want to come in. And, I'll use an example with myself. I started off on the Planning and Zoning Board of Appeals.
Mm-hmm.
So I learned about the process of zoning and how to ask for, amendments to, our zoning, and, why things are zoned residential versus commercial versus industrial. Yeah. And how to read our code and understand what's applicable, and then also get the sentiment and solicit the feedback of the residents, and then make a recommendation to the board, so the board can make a final decision on what the community has already chimed in on.
Correct.
It prepares folks for when we're no longer serving to be prepared to operate our government appropriately. So I think, amongst the other reasons that I have mentioned, that's why it's really important to have those type of entities in place, those committees in place, because they give us support, and it allows the residents to chime in and effectively co-lead the government.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like an organizational chart. You have the residents, the constituents, you have the village, the village manager, the mayor, trustees, and the committees under whoever the trustee is that's overseeing the committee. And that brings me to my next question. You mentioned how it should flow a certain way. You have a company background, you have a finance background, so you know where I'm coming from. The amount of money, I still go back to the amount of deficit that we're in as a village. Last I remember, it was $8.5 million. And I understand that events have to take place to keep the community engaged. And it's more of a rhetorical question. Did the community ask for some of these events? The end of summer festival, which we talked about last time. The splashdown that's on 10th Park, Washington Boulevard, where it's, interrupting the basketball court. I mean, was there feedback? And my second part of my question is, you mentioned multiple positions and a hierarchy. You have Lanae Satchel, who's the CFO, finance director, acting village manager. Mr. Greg Buchanan, who is the public work director and code enforcement director. Mr. Davenport is the assistant village manager and assistant public works director. Officer Daryl Fairley, who's the building and grounds director, crime-free housing director, and Kendall Silas, who's the director of Homeland Security and Director of Public Safety, in addition to 5 community engagement officers. Maywood doesn't have that much money to spread. Why can't we, even looking at the first one, Ms. Satchel, these are mid-level management positions. Chief Finance Officer is an executive position. Why are we wasting money on those positions instead of hiring somebody who's qualified?
Yeah, so let me tackle the first question about, did the residents ask for these things? I would say yes and no. Did the community ask for improved community engagement? Yes. And resources for our youth. The community has asked for a grocery store. The community has asked for infrastructure improvement. The community has asked for better communication. I think it's the how we're going about it that needs to be highlighted. The community, just and again, this is me speaking for myself. I think the community was looking to be at the table when we make these type of decisions, and also we have a role as a municipality. There's also the role of the park district, the library, nonprofit organizations, grassroots organizations, private entities that have a role to play, the Chamber of Commerce. So
Right.
I think it was about having creating synergy amongst these things and making sure that we're not stepping on each other's toes. If you're, asking about, there's been a lot of community engagements. There's a lot of hanging out. There's a lot of spending of resources on festivals and, community events. On one hand, I believe that the community appreciates it. On the other hand, I believe that from a municipality perspective, those resources are better used for municipal services. So that's ensuring that we have a full-time permanent village manager. We have a full-time HR director, that these roles are filled with competent people. Right now we have we have 3 or 4 individuals that are holding down multiple roles, and we've had a lot of village managers. Even since I've been around, there's been at least 6 acting or interim village managers, and I think that highlights a problem, our culture. It's also, when you have that much turnover, it's difficult to attract talent, because we're ultimately putting their careers in our in our hands. And if people don't think that we're going to have consistency within our local government and our administration, then you do lose talent. There has been a lot of investment in community engagement. Again, I do think the community appreciates activity, especially for our youth and for our seniors. Those are things that are expected. Should our municipality be doing it, or should we be supporting other organizations where that is their wheelhouse? I think that's probably more appropriate. I think had we gotten experts involved with the 10th Park development, which was one of the things that I pushed, not only just the Connor Heights Park, but in particular, if we're talking about the Doc Rivers family basketball court, that was something where the splash pad is great, but I would not have incorporated inside the basketball court. Water and basketball courts or surfaces is not good. We're very susceptible to someone getting injured. One of the reasons why we initially needed to redevelop that space was because there was a lot of standing water, and the court was not sloped in a way that proper drainage was happening. And so we initially resurfaced the grounds of the basketball court. It was not properly slanted, where the water that accumulates ever so gently slides into our drainage. It was flat. So when water lands, it's just sitting there. And that didn't happen the first time. And so that's where it's important to have engineers
Right.
that can help manage that have the expertise to understand grading and architecture and the type of material that you're using as well.
Mm-hmm.
Things like the splash pad are welcome. I think things like a pool are welcome, but we have to make sure that we have professionals um, overseeing it, and then we also have to make sure that we are um, being competitive with bigs when we get this work, and allowing individuals to come in and speak to their expertise and the
Mm-hmm.
experience that they have
Mm-hmm.
and what their approach is going to be to a project. Maywood has gotten very comfortable since I've been around with not having bigs out, which is really unacceptable, especially when you're using public resources. And it's one of those things. If you were having your own project and you hired a consultant, you would want them to get multiple pricing because you would want to make sure all of the considerations are
At least 3 bids. At least 3. You need
at least
3.
3, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what's required. And we waive those a lot of times for expediency purposes, or because the village has a previous relationship with some of these vendors, and sometimes things fall through the cracks. We'll have piles of dirt that sat on 5th and Washington for almost a year.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have to revisit issues that arise, whether it be the Dr. Rivers family basketball court.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily a direct result of no bidding, but that is that is an oversight issue. That
Right.
is, we're the experts at the table to do that. Even our resurfacing, we've done significant resurfacing in our community, which I'm, really happy about on one hand. On another hand, we have water infrastructure that is over 100 years old that
Mm-hmm.
just simply resurface over the top of it. And so my concern is down the line when we need to improve that water infrastructure, that we might negate we spent about $2.4 million on that we would need to break that up to address our, whether it be water mains or water lines that need to be updated and fixed. And so my assumption is that the streets that have been resurfaced are probably going to be deprioritized because they have been resurfaced, and it would be concerning, similar to how it was with Connor Heights Park, if you completely redo that, because now a year or two from now we've gotten some money, or we have a capital plan where now it calls for water infrastructure improvement or sewage improvement.
Mm-hmm.
So those are things where you want to have the experts at the table that are able to help you project manage this.
Right.
And so again, I think that's just one of those things where it's important just to hire people that you want their input and you need their input.
Absolutely. That's what truly moves a business, an organization forward, and having constructive feedback instead of just being a yes ma'am or yes sir. We're going to just do it this way because that's going to move the needle forward. Couldn't agree with you more, Trustee Jones, on that point. You're watching the Let's Talk Maywood podcast and Diversity Today Media. I had my host for tonight is the Honorable Trustee Miguel Jones. We're talking about the village of Maywood, obviously, the current status of Maywood and how it's going to look going forward. And with that, I want to ask you, Trustee Jones, what is your relationship with Mayor Booker? I know that watching the meetings, it kind of get contentious. It gets kind of like, oh my God, I hope an argument doesn't break out because of this. Because I've grown to see your passion for the community, and I believe that Mayor Booker has some compassion and passion for the community. But it's like you guys are missing. So when I hear you, explain your question before you ask it, it still is received like, Trustee Jones. Like it's a bother. So is there something hidden behind this response to the questions and the questions when it's being asked? And just, how does that look between you and Mayor Booker?
Yeah, so we don't have a personal relationship. The relationship that I have with the mayor and most of our board colleagues is professional. My job is the 7 of us on the board is to help co-lead the the community. I do think, in terms of the village president and myself, we have different schools of thought as it relates to our roles and how we should lead. I mentioned, I'm a strong proponent of what the residents said they wanted, and that's to enforce and abide by our council manager form of government. And so anytime we go outside that framework, I'm going to have I'm going to call that out. I also think, given my background with, my background in accounting and finance and risk management, anytime that I think a decision has not been thoroughly vetted, has not went through the proper protocol, I usually call that out as well. And whether it be, I mentioned no bid contracts, I mentioned not soliciting community input, and those type of things, I usually call out, and that's usually where we butt heads. But, my job is to work with the leaders that have been elected. So any personal feelings that I have are really irrelevant. My job is to look and overview the decisions that essentially our community need to thrive. And so that's, really my answer, to that. I will say, in terms of, I don't have a deference to our mayor in the sense that, we all in our form of government, we all have one vote. And I believe that we are all, and it's not that I believe it, but we all are on equal playing fields.
Right.
And so we all have a role to play. I don't defer to his leadership. I respect the role, and I'll continue to respect the role. I've told him before, Trustee Brandon, myself, and Village President Booker, both, we all were elected, even though Isaiah was already on the board. We all were elected in 2019. And at the time, Mayor Perkins was the mayor.
Right.
And I've told him, as it relates to how he was as a trustee, he did not defer to her. He was very aggressive with the ideas that he thought were right. Yeah. And he didn't defer to her by virtue of her being the mayor. And so in that regard, I feel the same way. Just because, I think you mentioned you learned something. It's a board for a reason. Right. We don't have a king. We don't have a one individual that makes all the decisions, and that's by design. And so my job is to give my thought leadership along with my other board colleagues, and for us to come up with a decision that, that otherwise one person wouldn't have the information to do. So that's my, overall thoughts on it. And, we have, our job is to execute on the community's comprehensive plan and to complement that with a strategic plan. Right. That's supposed to be our guiding light, our Bible to how we make decisions. And so our comprehensive plan calls for delegation, calls for many voices to make the decisions. It calls for vetting. It calls for being physically responsible. It calls for following the rules. Yeah. And so that's what that's my leadership style.
Was the fact that these individuals, Trustee Jones, who hold multiple positions, is it because of the dilution of the position, meaning that the high turnover rate, perhaps patronage hiring for people who are not qualified for the position? Do you agree that this comprehensive plan, or even on a wider scale, the strategic plan, would address the HR aspect, not just the operational aspect, but the HR aspect of bringing in people who are qualified, who is objective enough to listen to the constituents and thus be able to implement whatever business model that is used within that strategic plan. Do you think it would have made the village more effective overall?
I do. I think what makes our government work the best is for everyone to understand their role and to execute. So one of the first jobs on the board is to have a competent village manager and to create goals and objectives, and for the village manager to execute those goals and objectives by leading our administration. There is a significant disconnect between the board making goals and holding that village manager down to those goals. So it has been since we haven't met with our interim village manager to even establish goals, and Ms. Satchel has been in the role for at least 8 or 9 months at this point.
Do you know how much money, not just money that's been saved, Trustee Jones, but the amount of money that revenue or productivity has been lost over 8 or 9 months? Now, you know as well as I do, when you hire someone or you even put someone in a position temporarily, it's 90 days, probationary period, and it gives you more than enough time to bring someone in or hire an outside consulting firm to be able to fill that position until they hire someone. But not just that, the human resource director, you haven't had one since 2025. Other multiple positions. And again, it goes back to the strategic plan, comprehensive plan that you were just talking about. So I'm sorry to interrupt because you've been gracious to come on, but it's like spinning our wheels. And even talking to my friends and family who are still in Maywood, the frustration of not getting things done in a fruitful, tangible, economic way. And you touched on all of that. So I digress. I want to pass it back on to you.
Yeah, no, I think, as I mentioned, the community has, unfortunately, based on the culture, has kind of been bullied into either being silent or being forced to only give compliments to our, government because of some of the progress that has been seen. A lot of that has been, thankful to, again, I mentioned federal and state resources and local resources. There has been a lot to say is positive. I think, again, there are some shortcomings, but I also think the community isn't aware. As much as we have community engagement, you don't hear much about what's happening. Like, you don't hear much from our department heads speaking on their own behalf, or our attorney or what have you. So does the community know that we haven't had a HR director since late last year? That's not common knowledge. That's not something that's communicated in the newsletter. Does the community know why our former village manager was ultimately terminated and offered a severance package? No, those are things that aren't communicated because, again, I mentioned the disconnect because we don't have, press, actual, local press in our town. And, I am thankful for the residents and the community groups, whether it be the Coalition for Accountability or Maywood Watchdog, or there's other groups or Facebook groups that do chime in and try to give opinions and feedback and share facts. And those things do help, but they don't fill in the gap of having a nonpartisan press that is responsible for giving honest and forthcoming information to our town.
Right.
And, so those are the things that we're susceptible to. And we're susceptible to a lot of the propaganda. We have not, we are 2 years behind on our audits. The community know that. But that's what happens when, you have our finance director also being our interim village manager.
Has there been at least a financial review
I'm sorry.
Has there been at least a financial review?
Yeah, so we reviewed our budget, but what an audit does is, it has a
Checks and
third
balances.
party,
Yeah.
it has a third party accounting firm come out and confirm the financial conditions of our town, and also call out, our processes and procedures that are deemed risky, based on our organizational size. And so those things are mandated by the state that we do. We've asked for extensions, so we're not in bad standing, but
Right.
that doesn't exempt us, or it doesn't excuse the fact that those things should be done. And it also, again, I think it shows risk. If you're not able to follow your audits in a timely manner, that is a process issue, and that in and of itself suggests that there may be some risk in how you all hit deadlines, or you can't reassure based on a third party opinion the financial condition of our town. And so we're spending, we are managing, and I'll use that term lightly, but there's not that oversight. Oversight is very important, because all it takes is one or two controversies to impact your brand. And we've seen that in many towns. I think about some of our South suburban communities that all it takes is some bad decisions, or leaders that aren't doing the right thing, and your town can become insolvent very quickly. And it happens fast, especially when that oversight isn't happening. So I don't think Maywood is quite there yet, but you don't want to even create the conditions where that can happen. So that's one of my job. That's my job on the board, is to continue to bring that up and help to enforce that we're hitting those obligations.
Thank you for that response. It reminds me, there are some CPA firms in Maywood. One that comes to mind is Vina Nelson, Go Big Accounting. And there are other accounting firms out there who could step in and exactly meet the need that needs to be addressed, because 2 years is too long for a $50 million enterprise. Anything could go awry, like you said, at that point. So I just want to throw that out there. But I want to ask you, because we're winding down on our podcast. And again, you're watching Let's Talk Maywood on Diversity Today Media. I have the Honorable Trustee Miguel Jones, who is a regular guest. We appreciate his transparency and honesty when he's answering the tough questions. So one tough question I have, Trustee Jones, involves the casino. So when the village was awarded monthly, whatever, stipend, whatever, in perpetuity, there was an opportunity for the residents to become investors of this stock, anywhere from $250 to $25,000. As you mentioned, certain individuals have certain roles that will go in a newsletter, because there is no Village Free Press, there is no Maywood Herald or anything like that. That was a golden opportunity for the residents to become investors for Bally's, with Bally's Casino. Can you just tell me from your perspective what happened there, and how leadership omitted to bring that to the community's attention?
Yeah, so just to take a step back, as you mentioned, there was a Senate Bill 0690 that was led by Senate Majority Leader Kimberly Lyford, that allowed the village to benefit financially from the construction of the Bally's Casino in Chicago. And so that the breakdown was, for every dollar of revenue that was received, the village of Maywood would get 15 cents on the dollar, the village of Summit would get 15 cents on the dollar, and the state of Illinois would collect the remaining 70%. And so we have seen, because there's a temporary location, we have seen in the range of $10,000 to $15,000 a month trickle into the village as a byproduct of that policy that was passed. At the end of last year, there was an opportunity for investors to invest in three classes, if you will, cash investments to ultimately get stock in the casino. There was three thresholds ranging from $8,300 to $25,000, which would have allowed uh, anyone that wanted to invest, but in particularly Maywood, to be stockholders of of that of this build. And so again, I think that's something that uh, probably, or actually not probably, but should have been mentioned in our community engagement newsletter. That's something I believe if we had a local press, would have conveyed that information to the village. Uh, I know it was mentioned in the in some of the Chicagoland newspapers, but to the degree in which the suburbs received that message, the western suburbs, I don't think it was readily known or available. To the degree in which residents would have invested anyway, I don't know, but that opportunity should have been communicated. And I will say that won't impact the village's opportunity to collect once the once this permanent location is built. But in terms of individuals in the community that would have been interested in not conveying those opportunities, I think that was just another missed opportunity to let our community know how they can invest their resources. So again, that's something that we have to work on. The residents, again, they appreciate the festivals and the parties and those type of things, but they also want to know about opportunities like that. And so that's something that we unfortunately missed, but hopefully they'll we'll do better down the line.
I appreciate that. Definitely, Trustee Jones. I know that there are here in the DMV, the National Harbor, people think it's in Washington, D.C., but it's actually in Oxon Hill, Maryland. And Oxon Hill was a low income community when they decided to cut the trees and, fill the swamp and everything and build this national casino. It included MGM and fancy hotel and a bunch of restaurants and things like that. They reached an agreement with that town to say certain percent of the revenue will go to that town, and it worked wonders. It was an opportunity for residents. It was fantastic. And then Mayor Derek Wood, shout out to Mayor Derek Wood, who was the first Black mayor of Dumfries, Virginia. He knows Mayor Booker. They built a Rose Casino in that town, and again, they're generating revenue from that. And Dumfries, which was not very well respected, but I think it's the oldest town in Virginia, in North Virginia, but because of the agreement that they worked hard for, the board with the casino, it flipped. I mean, it's one of the nicer areas, building homes and very diverse population. And that's what heartens me, because I saw an opportunity, like you said, that was missed for the residents in the village of Maywood. And, money isn't the only thing, but it sure makes things easier. And if you had a few dollars to invest in the casino, then that would have been a good ROI. And someone with your county background, I know you can connect with what I'm talking about, right?
Absolutely. We just want to expose our residents to any opportunity that we think that they could benefit from, especially if it gives them opportunity to invest in something that ultimately has a relationship with our town. So again, missed opportunity, for the residents that otherwise would have thought about investing, or maybe they would have, created some sort of pool of residents that, might have been worth, for folks that, that frequent, casinos and that type of thing, maybe they would have wanted to be private investors.
Yeah.
But, I think within our town, there are still opportunities with even in our corporate boundaries to invest in. There are opportunities for residents to whether it be businesses or homes, if you do have, extra resources, I would encourage people to invest in their homes. There's been, quite a bit of equity built up over
Yeah,
the past several years that, is really, an opportunity for residents to, think about as they think about estate planning. And
hmm
and there'll be other opportunities, down the line. Maywood is on the move, so
yeah,
I wouldn't be completely discouraged by this, but it's one of those things. Again, communication is going to be key, and I hope if we get an opportunity to get local press in our town, we need to invest in it. As residents, that's something that could be good use of resources for residents. That if they're looking to invest in something, I would say your home or your business or local press in our town. That's really important.
absolutely. And my final question tonight, Trustee Jones, is in regard to, I know that's been out there that Mayor Booker has been using the vehicle that was purchased for him, the village vehicle, for other business matters. Recently, it was brought to our attention that he used the village vehicle to frequent a liquor store in Westchester. There are photos and things like that, and not jump to conclusion. However, in a personal leadership, you always want to make sure that your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed. And you never know who's watching. So as a leader, you don't want to put yourself in a compromising position, and it appears that he has. So what is your feedback as it relates to Mayor Booker using the village vehicle for other matters outside of government business?
My feedback to him would be my feedback to anyone that has a company vehicle. Abide by the rules and the policies of that. Use it for village use. For personal use is highly discouraged, in a lot of ways prohibited. We have a village vehicle use policy. Get comfortable read it, and lead by example. We have had a former public works, code enforcement director that got in trouble for using our village vehicle in an inappropriate way. We have gotten sued and have caused fatalities by our law enforcement, not necessarily using it for personal use, but not following our rules, whether it be as it relates to chasing or pursuing vehicles. We have policy in those things. So it's really important that we are leading by example. Those vehicles are not ours, and they're the public resources. We want to make sure that we continue to earn the public's trust and read the room, right, and learn from prior mistakes. People do make mistakes. Maywood is a very forgiving town.
Yes,
but we don't want to exploit that trust. We have to remember that we're also part-time elected officials. So in terms of board members, especially if you're someone that's using a vehicle, it should be essentially used part-time. And that's why we have, we have personal time. So things that you do in your personal time, utilize your own personal resources. But, I think what we could do as a board, what I would encourage is to, I've encouraged our village manager to look into ways to log our use, to document how we're using our village assets, not just on the board, but our department heads, document those things. One, it ensures that we're not accelerating depreciation on our assets.
right.
It encourages accountability and transparency. It helps with audits. As I mentioned, us being behind it would help if an auditor asks for that type of information. It would help reduce waste. I'm thinking in terms of fuel and again, depreciation. our vehicles lose value, and so we don't want to overuse these things, and we don't want to put anyone at risk.
Right.
And so again, one of our most important jobs is to protect our brand. I'm wearing our village seal now, whether it's personal or private time. My priority is to ensure that I'm doing things that protect this seal. And so our brand is very important. So let's lead by example. And I think it's one of those things, again, being transparent. Maybe, if the mayor sees that there's conversations about that, he should address it.
Mm-hmm.
He should be public about what that was about versus, it's an alternative to act like it didn't happen. Or did it happen? Or maybe there's a backstory. Who knows?
Right.
There's speculation. Address it so we can put it to bed.
Right.
I think there was a couple things that weren't addressed about the use of our village vehicle. There was some footage that came out, so people were able to make their own, I guess, come up, with their own understanding of what happened. But I think we're responsible as, one of our duties as elected officials is to be transparent, take ownership, admit when we're wrong, and, ask for forgiveness and move forward. But
Yeah.
I think the best thing we could do at that point is for our board to come away with some takeaways and some policies to help discourage even the presence or the appearance of inappropriate use. If it's out there, I say let's be transparent and address it.
Absolutely. No, very well said. I do have one final question. Is Maywood in the business of recreation? Is Maywood, the village leadership, trying to take over the Maywood Park District? I know that this has been tussle going back to 2000, the referendum in 2006, 2007, where there is no expiration date for a referendum. But nonetheless, the park should have been turned over, but for whatever reason, they are not. Is the village of Maywood trying to take over the park, all the remaining parks that are under the Maywood Park District? Trustee Jones.
The municipality has taken on a significant space in the recreation segment of our town. Typically, that is not a municipal service. So to answer your question, yes, the municipality has done that. I think from a resident's perspective, usually they are less interested in who's doing it, but that it's just being provided. And so I think what we need to do, and I've mentioned this before, is that the park district and the municipality in which I serve on, we need to have public meetings to ensure that resources are being used in a way that's transparent and that a way in which the community can follow. So if the community wants to dissolve the park district, then we need to get that type of feedback. That has not been the sentiment of the community. There was a referendum question, that non-binding referendum question that asked the community about it, and I think there wasn't enough information for the community to make a educated decision. But typically, municipalities do not. That's not a municipal service.
Okay.
And so what I would say is I would call on the leadership of the park district to speak up, come to our board meeting, and say how they can support us. I think that's a part, or I'm sorry, how we can support them.
Right.
And their viewpoints. I think that's where the residents chime in. But having duplicate efforts as it relates to these type of things is wasteful. It's confusing for the residents.
Yeah.
I think the municipality uses it as a way to engage with the community members. That usually isn't a major function of our town, but we use it to. And when I say we, It's used as a way to funnel email addresses and phone numbers, and you have these events so you can get this information to use it for other reasons. And so I think it's one of those things where you asked a question earlier about, is the community asking for community engagement opportunities? The answer is yes. The assumption is that we're doing it in a professional manner, and we're doing it using best practices. Right now, we're not utilizing best practice. Right. The best practice is if you have a park district and you have resources, you have tax dollars that are funding those services, then it makes sense for that entity to be leading those efforts.
Sure.
And so that's what needs to be happening. And if we want to change course, that's something that the community has to decide. But I think the board is filling in a gap where I believe the park district has to step up and be more vocal about what they're doing and what their expectation is of the municipality. And we need to do it not behind the scenes, but we need to do it publicly and solicit input. And if there's challenges, let's address them, in the public square.
Yeah.
But that would be my answer to that is yes, we are in that space. I believe that we're there in all likelihood, there's a lot of waste and inefficiencies happening that will likely come out into the wash if you perform audits. But right now, you're not hearing a whole lot of fuss about it because either the community is unaware or, their assumption is that we're operating appropriately. And so I think we have to make sure that we're doing our job to square that up.
Yeah, excellent answer. I know when Mayor Perkins and the committee awarded Eternal Light the opportunity to work in the 200 building, that is definitely what they said. We are not in the recreation business, and we want the park district to. At that time, they weren't very strong, but they want them to build up and be able to take these tax dollars and rebuild their program, rebrand their image, if you will. So
yeah, and I would chime in too. I think the park district, there's been some turmoil that's been going on that has been echoed across the community. I would encourage folks to do their own research as it relates to some of the oversight entities, in our that have been created in our town, whether it be Maywood Watchdog or CFA.
Yeah,
those type of things when they happen, don't how can I say this? Don't contribute to allowing things to operate the way they should.
Yeah,
when people are seeing turmoil or confrontation, or hearing about not being in good standing, the community kind of gives up on some of those best practices. So that's where I think, as I mentioned, what's most important is your brand, and leadership. And so again, I think there's some good leadership over there in the park district, but I would encourage them to get ahead of those things, address them, be transparent about some of the challenges that you're facing. And if you need support from another governing body, let's talk about it. But I guess what I'm saying is I wouldn't put the entire blame on the municipality acting in a inappropriate way just by virtue of doing it. I think there is a lot to be desired in the way in which the community understands these functions, and making those things clear and understanding, does the park district have the capacity to lead these efforts? Because otherwise the community wants those events or want those resources anyway.
Right.
So I think there are some things that we need to address. in order to build confidence and understand that we do have the capacity. And so I would just encourage them respectfully to, get ahead of those things and let's start the conversation.
We had a two-part interview with Don Williams, the former president of the Park District Board. And yeah, you're right. There's divisiveness there, like nobody's business. There was definitely some issues with residency with a couple of the board members, and there was a physical incident where now it's a legal matter, and sometimes they don't even have a quota to run a meeting. So you're right. There's a lot of things going on there. But I'm hoping and praying that everything will resolve itself at the Maywood Park District level. And yeah, I mean, that the municipality, Village of Maywood, will work with the Park District, some type of resolution and be able to move forward. So I want to give you, as always, final say so in this podcast, and share a few words, whatever it may be, Trustee Jones. But for the next few moments, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Yeah. So Dr. Ratliff, Terrence, again, thank you for allowing me to be on Let's Talk Maywood. I always appreciate the platform to share my perspective on what's going on in the town. Residents, if you are a bike rider, if the weather permits, please join me and the Maywood Rolling Wheels Club tomorrow at 6:30 as we, ride in our community and promote health and wellness, encouraging more infrastructure improvement, more walkability, and let's, enjoy our town. We have seen a lot of road improvements, and we want to take advantage of it. So, I think it starts with us engaging with each other and talking about ways to work together. So, that's one thing I wanted to say. Also want to encourage residents to go to these board meetings, not just the municipality, but there are changes happening at District 89, 209, Library, Park District. Be engaged, be informed. This is your town to lead. These are your representatives, and you shouldn't leave them on the island on their own just to make decisions. Your job is your civic duty is to also participate, give feedback, refuse to be silenced. We live in a country, and we have a local government that needs that input, and we need people to be involved and be engaged. So I would encourage people to, go to these board meetings. I would also want to make residents aware that there are going to be a lot of efforts to discourage you all to participate in elections, most notably in November. Our midterm election is going to be huge. So make sure that you are up to date on your voter registration, know where your voting place is. Make a plan if for whatever reason mail-in ballots aren't a means to vote, that you have an opportunity to go in person if you can. But also reach out to your congressional and state leadership and encourage them to make sure that our voices are heard. There is an attack on our voting rights, and we can no longer thrive in this country if our voting rights are being attacked. So, please be engaged. Democracy is a participatory sport, meaning you have to participate in order to get something out of it. So I want to encourage you all to participate. And, we'll be having local elections happening in April of 2027. And that's another opportunity for you all to elect individuals that are going to be leading with, we'll be leading ethically, with transparency, with accountability, with your best interests in mind. And so I want to encourage you all to, do your homework, to, I hope I can garner your support, but don't just take my word for it. Make sure you look into my record and things that I've stood for. I'm an open book. feel free to reach out to me. My village cell is area code 708-288-8604. Please reach out to me. I'm here to help.
Nice.
And thank you again. Let's Talk Maywood for having me on.
Our pleasure, Trustee Jones. Thank you again, as always, for joining us this evening. Take a time for your busy schedule to talk about matters of Maywood. Late Maywood, the late American author, his name was Warren Bennis. He was an author of the book called Father of Leadership. Mr. Bennis said, leadership is the capacity to translate vision into reality. That vision that would take you far, that would become reality. And we've seen many, many instances in the world of business and government where vision has become reality. You talk about the New Deal by FDR, the War Against Poverty by LBJ. You talk about everything that happened when President Barack Obama was the first African-American president. It was a vision that became reality. We also look at the vision of the first Black mayor of Maywood in 1981-82, Mayor Joe Freeline, that was carried over by the first Black female mayor of Maywood, Edwina Perkins. These visions become reality. However, when you are a leader, you are prone to be judged either fairly or unfairly. Even when you're in the midst of doing everything you can for a community, whether it be an honest way or dishonest, whether it's ethically or unethical, legal or illegal, you will be judged by the content of your character and the work that you have completed. What have you done for me lately? May have been a song by Janet Jackson, but it's a reality. If you aren't doing things the right way, it will be called out. A leader will do things in an ethical way, and the ethics is doing things right, even when nobody is watching. So to the leadership team, the village, the municipality, the village of Maywood, I challenge you to continue to work in an ethical way. Wasteful spending is hurting the village. It's hurting morale, hurting the confidence. You have a cohesive collective total of 13% of 24,000 residents who vote, which is abysmal. Best practices should be looked at similar communities with similar demographics. If you are a leader in Maywood, Mayor Booker, the board, listen to the constituents. Because if you claim to be a leader and nobody's following you, then you're just taking a long walk by yourself. And 13% is next to nothing. Please do better. If you really care about the community and its future, accept constructive criticism and be able to take that, flip it, and turn it into something positive. But it starts by listening to the community. I am your host, Dr. Reggie Ratliff. Thank you for watching us tonight. Tune in to our next podcast where we have our next guest who is connected to the community and will provide valuable information. Like us on Facebook, subscribe on YouTube. God bless you. Be safe. Good night.